Hello there, product people. Welcome to the show that supercharges your abilities to become better thinkers, makers, and leaders. I'm your host, Alsawi, and I'm thrilled to have you join me for this exciting episode of Product People. In this episode, we talk about frameworks as thinking blueprints, how our views on them change with experience, what it takes to adopt a framework, and the PRFAQ framework itself. We also discuss the relentless push to ship products, the art of winning over skeptical executives, the promise of generative UX, the pulse of the startup world, the power of communities, and the transformative impact of structured thinking. So if you're a designer, engineer, product leader, or simply someone curious about how structured thinking drives real value, you're in the right place. As always, you can expect an open conversation, fresh insights, and practical advice that can fuel your own journey with product, design, and leadership. Let's jump right in. Today, I'm joined by a product leader, entrepreneur, founder, and community builder. He's been passionate about technology, product development, and innovation for as long as he can remember. He wrote his first piece of software at the age of 12 and sold his first product, a CRM tool for MS-DOS, at the age of 16. Originally from Brazil, he moved to Seattle in the late 1990s to work at Microsoft, where he led engineering efforts for Bing. After 7 years, he felt the irresistible pull of entrepreneurship and decided to start building his own ventures. He founded and scaled startups in both Seattle and London, raising over $40 million across various sectors, including social networks, events, media, fitness, health, and telecommunications. He also spent nearly 2 years at Amazon leading product and engineering teams. Our guest played a key role in shaping Seattle's startup ecosystem, helping launch what became the GeekWire Awards and the GeekWire 200. He currently organizes the Acquired Seattle Meetup, the Seattle Flow for founders and investors, and other community gatherings. He's also the author of the PRFAQ framework. When he's not working, you can likely find him running. To date, he has completed 8 marathons around the world, along with countless half marathons. Without further ado, let's welcome Marcelo Calbucci to the Product People podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So as we kind of get started, I always like to ask the question around your story. And this time I want to ask you around the different places that you lived and worked. So can you share how your living and working life across different and diverse locations and cultures has shaped you as a person? What kind of surprising lessons did you discover along the way?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely shapes you. I was born in Brazil. I went to college in Brazil. I studied there. After graduating, I worked for a couple years there. Then Microsoft went to Brazil to hire software engineers and moved me to the US, where I spent nearly 20 years. After that, I felt the urge to move to another country. We packed our bags, moved to England, spent 3 years there, and then moved back to the US, always living in Seattle. And I've seen different cultures around the world in terms of startups and business and lifestyle and everything. And there is definitely a big difference. And I think that, people know how to seek cultures that align with their values. So you end up in a city or a country that aligns with how you think about life, how you think about work, and how you think about people. So that has a big influence on me and in whoever is doing this kind of stuff. For me personally, I always been a very driven, very passionate, very ambitious person. So moving to the US has been a good fit for my style. And even when I live in London, I seek people that were like that as well, that were part of the startup culture and everything. So that's how it has shaped me a little bit. I think the differences that you realize between the cultures also help you understand the possibilities in the world, which is very hard to do if you only stick to one place. And that is a very powerful tool to have when you are an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. You said something around thinking and how when you make a decision based on what you think or what's your perspective on things like work, life, people. And that's where I want to zoom in, the thinking part. So and think about structural ways of thinking. And a lot of time when we say that, the idea of frameworks comes in. Why do you think frameworks are essential or needed Why do we have them? Why are they useful for product people? And walk us through how does that affect our thinking and perhaps even elevate it?
Yeah, I think there's two kinds of people, at least in the tech world, in the product world, some that love frameworks and some people that hate frameworks. And usually I think the people that hate frameworks is because they are overusing or misusing the frameworks, because frameworks are very powerful to help you get the job done. Framework is basically the, accumulation of knowledge of someone who did it many times and found patterns in the way they do it. So they can say like, hey, these patterns are very good for this kind of stuff. So let me, create a framework and a method and a system to accelerate how I get things done. So frameworks, when well used, they're basically a cheat sheet. Like you're moving faster through something that someone already figured out how to do. And I think they are very valuable. What I see often is people try to use, let's be very specific here, people try to use OKRs or PRFAQs or Agile or other frameworks in the wrong context or in the wrong way, or they even don't understand exactly what it does. And then it fails or it doesn't work as well as they expected, or they don't give it enough time for them to do once, twice, or three times to really understand how it works. And they start dropping it. So I do think that frameworks are a great way to think because they take a lot of the cognitive burden that you have when you're doing something new, and they help you focus on what's really important. What are you trying to decide? What are you trying to do? And not on the scaffolding and everything else that you need to do to get the core idea across. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And as you were kind of describing this, I wanted to get your thoughts on how does the perspective of how we see framework change depending on the expertise and the professional maturity that a product person might have. Do you think that as they kind of transition from starting off as a junior professional in their area, in their field, and moving to a intermediate, more experienced, and then becoming an expert in their field and honing their craft, does their perspective of the value of frameworks change by time? And perhaps do they get to the point eventually where they can create their own frameworks?
Yes, it does. That's a super interesting question, right? So what I think it happens is when you're a junior and you're just starting, there is two groups of people. I would say the majority, they really want to embrace frameworks for everything, right? Software engineering, design, product, whatever their function is, they love it because they don't know how to do better. So frameworks give them the guardrails to execute the work. So they fully embrace it, regardless if it works or not. Right. And there is a small percentage of junior folks that are like, no, I'm going to try it without any framework. I'm going to do it by myself. And usually it doesn't go well. When you get to be intermediate, I think things change a little bit. You have more critical knowledge about what needs to be done. I think there is fewer people using frameworks when they are at the intermediate level because they know how to do the job. So they don't feel they need as much frameworks. When you get to be senior, right, or to be an executive, then you realize the power of framework in accelerating the job, like I mentioned before. So you start really adopting them and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the framework. And I'm a big believer that most frameworks are based in other frameworks, like OKRs was based on management by objectives, which was probably based on something else that came before that. So what ended up happening is when you get to be a very senior person, you start creating your own variation of frameworks because you see the weaknesses in the ones that you used before and you adopt that in your organization. And for some people, that spreads outside of the organization, the same way OKR did and PRFAQ did, and so many other frameworks like design thinking. So there is a change that I think from blindly adopting to I don't need it to we know how to use it really well.
Okay, let's take a concrete example to demonstrate for our audience. So assume I come to you, someone with expertise around frameworks, and not only the expertise of knowing the frameworks, but also knowing when to apply them. And some people struggle on how to organize their thoughts, ideas, but also be able to share them with others. In that case, that context, what are some ways that they can go about doing this, organizing their thoughts and being able to communicate and share them clearly?
Yeah, a framework is like a language. Like you're developing a language that two or more people can communicate more clearly. Instead of having to explain in details everything, you only explain, whatever is the field in that framework, if you will, right? That part of the template that you have to fill because people already know what that means, right? So let's give a very simple example. Let's say you work at a company company. And the PRD template for your company, which PRD stands for Product Requirement Document, has a section for localization and translation, right? And everyone knows what to expect there. So as a product leader, you're going to write on that section, like, what is the expectations about localization for the feature that you're writing? Maybe it's none. Maybe it's say like, this feature is not going to be localized, right? Or localization doesn't apply for this feature. Now you hand that off to an engineer, and the engineer picks up that document. The engineer already knows how to read that framework, right? That template. So they go immediately to that field, they read it, and they know what to expect there. So they don't need to be chasing around the document, reading 6 pages or 8 pages of document to try to understand what is the implication for that aspect. So that's where frameworks become very powerful between teams that adopt them and know how to use them.
You said something very important, and I want to probe in a little bit further on it. You spoke about common language across all parties that are using the framework. Often I see something that happens even before that where a lot of people might struggle, which is the context and the change management, as some might call it. So there is the application or the context of the framework itself and how we go about applying it and using it, with the assumption, as you said, that the people involved, in your example, the engineers, are already on board. But in some cases, you're coming into an organization, maybe it's the OKR framework, maybe it's a different framework, and you're trying to create conditions necessary for the framework to be adopted within the organization because you see the need for it. Maybe the yearly planning is very haphazard. There isn't clear objectives to be achieved. There isn't clear ways to measure success. So you propose the OKR, the Objectives and Key Results Framework for the organization. Where I'm going with this is before using the framework, before the application, before being able to reap the benefits of using a framework, what are the steps or the things necessary to provide the context and the adoption to bring people on board and say, okay, yes, we will be using this framework. We're happy to take any education on what does it mean. It's the first time for the organization, and bringing people along the journey. So that's what I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Adopting a new framework is hard. It's really hard because there's a lot of resistance, right? A lot of people want change, but they don't want to change, right? They want the process to be better, but they don't want to change the process. So it's a complex paradox that exists in people's mind. I think it's very important before you adopt any kind of framework to set the stage that the first few times is going to be hard. You might get it wrong and you might need to try it again to get it right. The same way if you wake up one day and say like, I'm going to run a half marathon, just to pick an example that is around me, like you're probably not going to do it well and you're probably going to struggle. And you're probably not even going to finish, right? I'm not going to say that frameworks are as hard as running a half marathon, but like it requires time. It requires exercise. It requires practice. And it's not like reading a theoretical book or a theoretical article about a framework that's going to make you an expert on it, right? Because it also depends on the culture of the organization. So you have to start with the purpose, like what problem are you trying to fix with this framework? And tell people like, be prepared for it to be a struggle the first 2-3 times that we use it until we get it and we see if it actually addresses the problem or not, right? And then, people can have a educated conversation about should we continue using this or not. So I can give an example about that. When I work at a startup maybe 6 years ago, we decided to adopt OKRs. And I'm going to be honest, it took 3 quarters for us to get it right. The first 2 quarters were a struggle. Like we made too many OKRs that were too complex, OKRs that were harder to measure, that wasn't really, the right language. And you only discover that at the end of the quarter, right? When you're looking back at the OKRs and say like, hey, did we achieve that or not? And then like, well, we don't even know how to measure if we achieved that or not. Oh, wow, that was a mistake. So it takes a little bit of time and practice to get it right. So give you and your team room to practice and try it and commit to it. You have to suspend a little bit of disbelief so that you can see if it works on your situation or not. So that's what you should think about before you adopt a new framework and work with your team for it.
Thanks for sharing the PRFAQ framework. I wanted to get your thoughts. Walk us through the what, the how, the why, the when of the framework?
Yeah, the PRFAQ framework was invented by Amazon 20 years ago, right? And it stands for Press Release and Frequently Asked Questions. And it's a framework to discuss the strategy of a new initiative or an existing initiative to change something that already exists. And it's a framework that really helps engage people on your working group to discuss, debate, and decide on this strategy. So I think it's very powerful because it's a combination of writing, which is a form of thinking, with collaboration, right? Which is a form of developing ideas. A lot of idea generation frameworks involve some type of group thinking and collaboration, and PRFAQ does combine both together. So it's very powerful in that context. And the document basically starts with a press release, and it's a press release about a product or a service or a process that doesn't exist, right? You are painting a picture of the future. Although you're writing in present tense, right? You write a PRFAQ as today we are launching this product to do this thing, but nothing has been done yet. What you're doing is basically setting a vision and setting the stage for the frequently asked questions, where you're going to including a lot of information about the feasibility, the viability, and the value of the product that you're creating, both for your business or your organization and for your customer, right? And it's a very customer-centered document. If you understand a PRFAQ, it's always from the perspective of customers. Will customers want this? Do they have the problem that we're trying to solve? Is the solution going to address that? Is it the right price? Are they going to be able to adopt it in their organization or their personal use case? So that's the 10,000 foot view of a PRFAQ.
What are some other frameworks that are, say, in the same category? You know, when you look at products, you look at something like cars, for example, and then you have competitors bring into market an equivalent in terms of categories and features. So if we think about the PRFAQ framework, what kind of other frameworks that people might be more familiar with that would be in the same category?
Yeah, I think the one that is probably the closest to PRFAQ would be the business model canvas. The business model canvas is a way to capture, the strategy and the vision of a new product or a new business. There is a product model canvas as well. That is a variation of that. The difference is these frameworks write fragments of sentences. They are very brief, right? They are to capture the overview. The PRFAQ is a 6-page document, right? That you can give to anyone to read, even if they don't have any context, and they will get it. They might not agree that it's a good idea or not, but at least they will understand, they fully understand the idea. So that's probably the closest equivalent.
As we kind of structure our ideas, and we're talking a lot about thinking, and there's a common question that is on a lot of people's minds, which is around, how do I evaluate an idea? How do I take something that is in someone else's mind, and sometimes they can describe it, they can communicate it, but how do I say this is indeed a great idea or a horrible one? And how do I know? How do I objectively, as someone who didn't execute the idea yet, figure that out? So walk us through your thinking. If someone comes to you with an idea, what is your process around evaluating?
Yeah, I think there is many ways of doing that, right? I think one practical way is to leverage your network, right? And that's where the PRFAQ really shines, because once you write a PRFAQ, the goal of the document is to go around and share with people and ask them, like, provide feedback. And there is a structured way of providing feedback for PRFAQs that I elaborate on in the book. And the gist is basically like, you have this document that you wrote that tells about the vision and strategy for a product. You provide them to a person that you know. It could be another entrepreneur, a product person, a peer, a former colleague, or investor or an advisor. And you ask them to, provide specifics about, do you think this problem exists? Do you think the solution is adequate? Do you think the market exists? What do you think are going to be the challenges in executing this idea? So you collect that information from multiple sources, right? It could be that one person is like, you can't do that because the technology is not possible. And another person who is more expert in the technology is going to say, yeah, you can do that. There is already a solution for that type of problem that you have. So you collect all that information and you digest and you try to understand what's possible or not. Now, the critical part of an idea is the customer, really. So you do want to validate as much as possible if they actually have the problem that you think they have. And there are many dimensions to a problem, right? It's not only, oh, yes, I have the problem. It's like, do they have the problem? Number one, is the problem big enough, right? Because if the problem is not big enough, they don't care to fix it. They don't care to address it. Is the problem frequent enough? Is it a problem that they only have once a year, like filing their taxes? Or is it a problem they have like every day or every week? So you need to understand all dimensions of the problem to see how likely people are to try to find a solution or to buy a solution for that problem. So that's number one. If you don't have that, you have nothing, basically. And the way to identify that is basically to talk to your customers. I know I sound like a broken record. Probably many of your guests came here and said, like, talk to the customers, understand them. And that includes like interviews with them, includes surveys, including look at market research about that customer base, including competitive analysis. So you need to have a good grasp on the problem. I think that's number one. Then once you do that, you have to figure out what solutions, what variations of solutions address that problem. In the case of PRFAQ, there is no specific framework for ideation. So the PRFAQ doesn't prescribe any type of ideation. So you can use whatever works for you. You can use brainstorming, design thinking, or any other form of ideation that you find useful. To find one or more solutions for the problem. And then you do it again. You talk to your customer and say like, hey, if this solution exists, would you buy it? Would it address your problem? How much would we pay for it? When would you use it? When would you not use it? Or how you're addressing it today that could be replaced by this new solution. So I think these two parts, what is the problem and what is the solution that addresses the problem, are incredibly critical. And a lot of people miss that aspect. Right? They come up with a brilliant idea because they saw technology, they think something is really cool, but they don't really understand the problem and how to address it.
I've heard something in many organizations, and I know this might like make people feel a little bit agitated, but I want to get your reaction to it. You get some leaders with varying product maturity in different organizations say things like, you're obsessed with this methodology, process, frameworks, all that kind of technical ways of doing things. You're an idealistic person. We need to ship. Our focus is shipping. We need to ship new features. We need to create more capabilities for our digital products. And there's this obsession around shipping and less focus on your process, on your methods, on the how you work. So I want to get your thoughts on this. Have you heard this yourself in some places? And how should we, as product people, think about this and perhaps even react to it?
It is very important for the executives and the leader to be skeptical of new ways of doing things, right? Because otherwise the team keeps changing every month or every quarter how they are doing things and they don't get anything done. So I think leaders questioning and like putting the brakes on some of this, methodologies or frameworks is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. However, on the flip side, what you want to do is you want to show results, right? Everything that matters at the end of the day is like, are you showing the results? Are you not only shipping the features, but are actually customers using it, enjoying, buying it, consuming, engaging with it, whatever the metric for that specific feature or product is. So that's how you measure things. So one way to work with executives that are skeptical is basically to show how a small thing that was done using a methodology or a framework or a new system or a new tool even, provided results. So trying to change too fast, it's really hard. You can only change an entire organization if it starts from the top down, right? Not the bottoms up. From the bottoms up, you need to start small, improve along the way what's working and what's not working. And in the age of AI, I know we've been already, 20 minutes into this episode and we're just talking about AI. In the age of AI, there are so many tools. And I think it's very important to be skeptical of those tools, right? And try it small, see how it works, and adjust to the needs until you start seeing the results that you were expecting. So that's a normal thing. I don't think people should be super concerned when they get pushback from leaders or executives.
Thank you for sharing. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I'll ask you more questions around the startup ecosystem. Hey there, my amazing product people. If you're trying to find your own story with product, design, and leadership, gain a new perspective on being human in a soulless corporate world, and possibly have a good laugh in the process, you can grab your very own copy of my latest book, Product People, A Journal of Laughter and Tears. It's available on Amazon in all formats right now. Happy reading. All right, and we're back. And I wanted to ask you about the startup ecosystem. How do you see this startup ecosystem evolving in the last couple of years? What happened? Where do you see it going next? Especially with a lot of the hype that we see around AI.
I'm not a historian, but I've been around the startup world for exactly 20 years. So I started in 2005. It was still the tail end of the dot-com, bubble bursting. And there were very few startups in 2005. Things started to pick up again. By 2006 already, we're in full motion. And over the years, there have always been these technology waves that enable new ideas and new startups, but also change dramatically how old solutions and old problems were addressed. This goes from mobile and cloud and even the power of compute, right? So now we can do a lot more complicated and sophisticated things. This is even before LLMs and the new wave of AI. We are again, in the beginning of a new wave. I don't think AI is here yet in terms of solving lots of the problems that we know. And it reminds me a lot of the early days of the web, right? So if you're old enough to remember the web in the late 90s, most websites were not what you would think about a website today. Most websites were like static pages with, just an image. They were basically the translation of whatever that business had into HTML. And they were like brochureware. So if you had a website about a hotel, like it wouldn't be about booking and about photos of the hotel or reviews or anything like that. It was just like a copy, of whatever they had in a marketing material, put in a web page. It took us maybe 5 to 10 years to fully understand the power of the web and what it could do and evolve the products in that way. I think we are doing something similar with LLMs right now. And I want to be specific about LLM because it's slightly different than AI. AI is more broadly, but the idea of LLMs is very well known today. So what we're seeing is people adding chat everywhere today. They are basically slapping, a box for you to talk to your spreadsheet, talk to your document, talk to your, booking agent. And I think that's basically like, hey, we are still trying to do things the old way. You still have the website and the web, but now we have a chat box. And I think that's the first attempt at using LLM. What we're going to see moving forward is going to be very different than what we see today, right? And I don't want to say agent because the word agent has been so overused and overloaded right now that people are really getting confused about what it means. But like on the example of travel, you can imagine that you're going to have something on the background that take care of making sure that if your flight is delayed, that you're rebook in another flight. And for you, it's going to be passive. You're not even going to know that it took place, right? You're just going to be notified that like now you're in a new flight. And this is going to be like an agent working for you and help you manage your travel, including hotels and, transportation and everything else. Versus you going to, Expedia or some other website and like chatting with it about what are your options or not. So we went from browsing to chatting to agents. And like, we're not there yet. We are going to agent. So I think that's going to be super interesting on how things gonna, take off. I don't know what shape that's going to be. I think a lot of the UX that we have today has been defined for the last 20 years. We're going to have to rethink about that quite a bit. There is a lot of talk about generative UX, which is the idea that UX that changes dynamically with the need that you have. Now that we have AI, we can do that. I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or not. It's still to be seen. But we're going to evolve the language and the style of tools that we build. And I'm really excited about that future.
All right. We spoke about many things from structured thinking to change management. We spoke about startups, solving problems, power of LLMs, generative UX. So we covered a lot of different topics, and I'm interested to hear a success story, especially around the structured thinking and how it really makes a difference, and perhaps maybe the other extreme where the lack of structuring your thinking resulted in failures.
I'm trying to think about the lack of structured thinking. I have a few good examples for structured thinking.
Well, we can start with that and then see where does it go.
Yeah, so a good example that I can give is a startup that I did. I started 13 years ago. It was in the fitness space, and we would work with health insurance companies and employers to reward and recognize employees who were or employees or members who are living an active lifestyle, right? So basically, we would integrate with all the apps and devices out there. You would earn points and badges, and there would be challenges. Your typical wellness fitness program. And at that time, it was very early days of mobile. It was also the early days of the idea of gamification and using behavior economics to drive product design. So we spent a lot of time investigating what was possible, what was not possible, and thinking through all the aspects of what people do in their lifestyle. So basically we decompose, the activities that everyone did from there was the typical running and biking and swimming and doing yoga, but also like the walking, the going to the gyms, the being out and about, that were all indicative of you living an active lifestyle. So we created a structure to map out what people are doing. And then we work with, health professionals to understand how those activities impacted their longevity and quality of life. And from that, we were able to create a product that really resonated with customers. The customers on this case was both the end user and the insurance company and employers. So we worked for months on understanding that aspect of the problem so that they could solve and address it in a way that was valuable for them. And it was before PRFAQ, before I even knew PRFAQ. But at the time, I did try to create my own frameworks to adopt that and to explain what we were doing, why we were doing it, how we were doing it. And the team really embraced that. And what I think was very successful about that is not only we built a very good product that worked surprisingly well. I shouldn't have said surprisingly, but it was really good product. But the team also worked really well. So there was this synergy between like how we work internally with the quality of the product that we produce. So for me, that is a great example of like using structure so that you both have a functional organization and a functional product that addresses the needs of the market.
Okay, that's very interesting. When we started off and I was asking you about the different places that you lived, the culture, the choices that you made around that, and what was surprising, you spoke about values and how you see that people seek out cultures and places that align with their values. From that, and as you were kind of giving me the story, really formed a question in my mind around where and how do we get our thinking influenced? So how does our thinking get influenced by the outside context and circumstances? So I really want to get into this. I want to understand your thoughts around the role of communities in influencing our ways of thinking, especially around how does it change now, if at all, with things like AI agents. There's a lot of conversations now around AI-based bot profiles that you see on social media and the ethical use of that. Does that influence our thinking? And how so? Really love your thoughts on this.
This is a 1 hour conversation or more, and I've been thinking a lot about it, and I don't know if I have all the answers. So, from an evolution perspective, we are social beings, right? Like we, evolved to live in groups of people, in tribes, in community, and leverage the collective knowledge so that we can do more and we can achieve more. And there's plenty of books and resources out there that explain about that, right? So I think that's very well-known fact. And I think like people are more influenced by the people around them than they think they are. And that applies not only to your household, but like to the people that you hang out with, to the people that you work with, and that influences your choice of clothing, your choice of car, your choice of where to live, your choice of work, even your behavior towards other people or towards customers. So if you work in a toxic environment, you are more likely to be a toxic person, right? Or you're going to say like, this is not for me. I need to leave this environment and find someplace else to work. So there is a big impact on the people that live around you, on how you think about life and problems and solution and technology. Personally, I really enjoy being around entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs are some of the most optimistic people out there. Right? They have this view of the world that is like, we can do it, we can change it, we can ship it, we can build it, we can get people to rally around our idea. And that's contagious. Like if you go to meetups or to events or to dinners with other founders, you live energized, right? Even when there is like some doom and gloom about what's possible, you still live energized because, these are people that want to change the world. So I think that's super important, in the way that defines how we think about life and everything that we do. I think AI brings a different dimension to this problem, which I've been thinking a lot about the last few months, right? So we evolve since we are a baby, to be around a bunch of people and like to communicate and develop language and develop thinking by talking with other people. Over the last 10 years, you have a new generation of babies and kids who grew up with devices, right? That wasn't the case, before the 2010s. And we don't know the impact that's going to have because we haven't seen that long enough. We probably need 30 years before we can see the impact that that's going to have. And now the way I'm thinking is like, what's going to happen with this new generation of kids? Not the ones that are born today, but probably the ones that are going to be born in the next 5 years or so, where they're going to grow up and they're going to be talking with a device like Alexa or Siri as if it was part of their life. So they're going to develop whole different systems in their brain to communicate and be influenced by these things. So there is one way to look at this is like, this is going to be terrible. This is going to create a lot of problems. A machine is going to be telling them how to think about certain things in life and the values that they should have and the behaviors that they should have. The other way is we're going to develop the antibodies to know how to work with these devices and to communicate with them. So I don't have an answer right now, but I've been thinking a lot about it. And I do think that there's going to be a slight change on how people perceive person-to-person communication. Like 20, 30 years from now, people might value more that person-to-person communication. So the society might change quite a bit. And it's going to be interesting to see.
I want to get more into your thoughts on a specific cause, a topic, or an issue that you're personally passionate about and would like to share with our audience.
Yeah, I think I'm going to continue the thread of communities. I'm very passionate about that space, right? I think building communities, and I'm using the word community very broadly here. It's your family community, it's your friends community, is your interest-based community. It could be around a sport, an activity, also your professional communities. I think communities are very powerful. So much so that I've been even building a product around that. But the idea of like finding the tribes that align with what you want to do, with the values that you have, with the support that you need is very important for society. And I think we lost a little bit of that because of the pandemic. It accelerated the adoption of certain technologies and people are more isolated. And we all know about the loneliness epidemic around the world. It's not only a phenomena in the US, it's happening in many other places. And I keep thinking like, how can we address that, right? Like fundamental level, how can we help people build connections with other human beings so that they feel more purpose in their life, more meaning, and they can give and take more from society so they live more fulfilling lives. So I'm very passionate about that space. I've been reading a lot about it over the last 4 years or so, even more than that. And I want to invest, the next few years helping that aspect of life.
Now we get to an interesting part. I think it's very much related to a sense of community around the Product People podcast. Our last guest asked the next guest, which is yourself, a question. And the question was, how do you keep up with all things AI? That is tools, process, and impact.
I'm going to say what's probably on most people's mind. I'm overwhelmed. There is so much happening. It's changing so fast. And I want to know, right? So I read a lot of newsletters. I read a lot of blogs, a lot of articles. I also love podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Every week I'm listening to anywhere from 5 to 10 episodes while running, while driving, even while cleaning the house or doing, work on the yard. So podcast is a great way that I learn, but mostly I try things, right? So right now I've been trying a lot of AI coding tools. I tried a lot of AI writing tools. I didn't like any of them. I didn't think it sounded like me. So I'm still struggling with that. And it's hard to keep up, right? So if you're overwhelmed and you're feeling like I can't digest everything that's happening, that's normal. On the good side, I think things are stabilizing a little bit. Over the last two years have been very chaotic. There is like every week major announcements. Now I'm already feeling like the pace is slowing down, right? Like the products integrated AI into the UX. The foundation models have been stabilizing, so the announcements are not as frequent and not as dramatic as before. Some people might say like we are hitting the peak of the AI bubble, but from a learning perspective, it means that you can catch up with what's happening.
And what's one question you'd like to ask our next guest?
I'm a very optimistic person, so I'd love for them to tell us how they think AI is going to make the world better.
Lastly, for those that are interested in learning more about your work and connecting with you, how can they reach out?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is to go to my book's website, which is www.theprfaq.com, or search Google for PRFAQ framework. And from there, you can find all my contact information, LinkedIn profile, Twitter, my email address, everything is there.
Marcelo, this conversation was insightful and practical, and I want to say thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the Product People podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I want to express my gratitude to all our listeners. Your support means the world to me. If you found today's episode valuable, please hit subscribe, leave a review, or share this podcast with your friends. I also encourage you to share your feedback and your ideas on what topics you'd like to hear about next on this podcast. Your input is very important as it helps me learn and improve. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes, and until next time, stay courageous, creative, and compassionate. Take care.